Okay, so we'll record this session, and we've been working on a menu. We learned about extended ASCII characters, about able to hold down the Alt key and type the number on a keypad to bring up special ASCII characters. I've also found there's some type of bug running the Control F5 in my system. I just have to highlight and tell it to execute. I don't know what's going on with that, but running the selection, all we've currently got is to write some text to the screen so it looks pretty. We get a prompt back. If we try to hit anything 1 through 5, nothing happens other than it just prints 1 to the screen because we don't have any code to show the host name or show the last login or any of this stuff. To actually get this to get the user to enter information into the screen, we would need to add some code here on line 15 to store information that a user inputs into a variable so we could determine what they pressed and do something with it. Do you remember the code to prompt the user for information? What was that commandlet? We did it in some of our other scripts.
Read host.
Read host. Yes. So we can use any type of variable. I kind of like this answer because it's an answer that a abbreviation of answer. You don't have to be answer. It could be whatever you want. You could have made a variable called menu selection or something like that for the variable name. So that the name doesn't truly matter as long as it's not a keyword. Like $true would be a Boolean true. You wouldn't want to. You couldn't deal with that. But if you did try to type in true, it would be in the drop down. You realize, oh, I can't use that. So $answer equals read host followed with the prompt. And then inside of quotation marks, the question. Please choose an option. And that will present the question to the screen. So if we go ahead and run that selection, I noticed that it auto puts a colon, so I really didn't need to put the colon. So I see that's a bug. I can take the colon off, and it because it already appends that. Let me rerun that. So there we go. Choose an option. I could down here after I've run it, put the $ANS and see that the ANS variable did store what I typed. So neat. So we've gotten this far. A program like this, where we have more than one thing to search for, we don't want to use an if statement. We don't want to check if they inputted 1, do something, and then check, what about if they inputted 2, do something else. We can't really use an if else, because if else is, did they press number 1, show host, otherwise do something else. We got 4 different options here. So once you get past the single option, trying to come up with enough if statements to test all possible combinations is not adequate. It can be done, but there's so much logic there and code and weirdness that you have to do. So coding languages typically have something called case, where that you can feed it a user input and it will scroll through a list of options. And when it hits a particular option that matches the input, it'll execute the code for that option. So there's no, is it 1? And then another if statement, did they put 2 in? There's simply this listing of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then a default. If it checked the value against 1, against 2, against 3, and it got to 5, and none of those match, there's also a default option that can be ran. So let's look at how that switch, like I said, it's known as case and most other things. So as I type in switch and I hit tab to auto complete it, it auto generates the general structure of it. If yours didn't auto generate, you're basically switch with the parentheses, you're opening and closing curly brackets, and then you have conditions and a default, and you have curly brackets out beside them. So instead of $X, I either need to change the $X to answer, or I need to change answer to X. I'm going to change the X to match the variable. Yeah, it's used now. Stop. It's used right there. See? It's right there. PowerShell. Wake up. Okay, I quit talking weird stuff. So still don't know what to do, but I don't know why that's underlined. It's a bug in the Visual Studio Code because we are using it now. So how I would construct this out, these conditions here, I would go ahead and copy. And how many conditions do we have? We have 5. So there's 2, 3, 4, 5. And instead of condition, I need to put what is going to be an answer that I need to compare against. So when you read the host, we want the user to hit the number 1 and hit enter. So if they hit number 1, I want it to compare against number 1. So that's what condition means, is what is it that you're looking for? What letter, what number? So all of these conditions can be changed into the value that you want the user to press and pass into this. And the curly brackets are the lines of code that you would run. So if I press number 1, I would need some code inside the curly brackets that would show the host name. If I press number 2, I would need code inside the curly brackets that would display the last login name, and so forth. In default, I might need to print an error to the screen. Like you can only press numbers 1 through 5. Anything outside of that, you're an idiot. Or better yet, just write host and give them an ID 10T error. I'll spell it out so that the end users wouldn't really know what I'm saying to them. Some of you are shaking your heads thinking, if I put the number 10 in there, it looks like a word. When you work with IT, you'll understand, you'll know that there'll be a few people that you could actually just say that there's an ID 10T error and they won't catch on to what that is. Also PEBCAC error. Y'all heard of PEBCAC before? Problem between keyboard and chair. PEBCAC error, abbreviation for that. And ID 10T, of course. The idiot error. So sometimes when you press, these menu options up above, they're really simple. They're pretty much just one-liners to get that information. But if you have one of these options up here requiring 50, 300, 3,000 lines of code or something like that, if they press one of those numbers, I really wouldn't want to have a switch statement and get number 3 and then have 3,000 lines of code listed before number 4 was there. It'd be really hard to figure out and see where my switch statements cases were, because if these are spread out from each other because there's tens to hundreds of lines of code in each one of those curly brackets, things get way on down the screen. So if this is just chock full of whatever, it gets hard to figure out, okay, where's my next option for switch? And also, since that we are looking at code that branches and does multiple things, we really want to design it so it's modular. And to do that, we can use functions. You may have heard of the term function before. So I want to create a function for the menu, because every time that I choose an option here, I want it to execute it. I want it to show me the value, and I want it to pause. And then when the user is ready, when they hit the space bar or any key, it goes back and shows them the menu again so that they get the option of choosing something else. I don't want them to just quit the program. I would rather them be able to press a button, get the info, press spacebar, and then them give the option to run something else. That's going to require the menu up here to be displayed every time that they get done looking at an option. So let's put all of the menu into a function. Create a function, use the keyword function. Followed by the name of the function that you want to use. And typically, if you're going to create a function, this is basically what the PowerShell commandlets are. They're just a function, a grouping of code. So I could name it anything really. But if you're a good coder, you're going to follow the naming convention of PowerShell commandlets mostly. So I want to do a verb-noun. What is the noun? The noun is menu. The verb, we could do get menu or show menu or maybe display menu. Although get is one of the verbs that's really, really commonly used in PowerShell. So I think I'm going to use get because I don't believe there's a command anywhere that's for display. There's not a there's a disable. Disable's a verb they use, but there's not a display. Show is a verb they use. So I could do show menu, or I could do get menu. I think show probably makes more sense. Show menu. It doesn't really matter. And you don't have to follow. I could name it Scooby-Doo. And I could just run Scooby-Doo anytime I wanted to see the menu. But I'm not going to be that cool. Scooby-Doo is cool. I'm going to do PowerShell and go show menu. It's followed by a simple function anyway that we're not going to be sending values to, is just to open a curly bracket and then put a closing curly bracket. And I will likely want to do a clear host so that I don't see when I run this program, I don't see the creation of the function. So right now, if I run the program, let me select this right here alone by itself. If I run that, now let me grab the first line too. If I clear the host and then I run that code, the function is generated, but notice what's not on the screen. I don't see the menu on the screen. That's because instead of it doing all of that work, it stored all of that into a function called show menu. So it's not going to actually run that code until you type show menu. When you type show menu, it's going to run those 8-9 lines of code there on the screen. Okay, let's create some other functions. We'll create a function for each one of these. We don't really need one for quit. We can just write the break. I think breaks out of the switch statement, makes it go down to here. Without a break, it'll keep trying to reissue the switch statement and check again for input. It's almost like a loop, the way that it works. So break will break out of this. It's been a little bit since I made a menu. Like I said, a menu type code like this is normally not what you do for a PowerShell script. However, creating functions, that is something you might actually do. Functions are pretty important because you may have a set of code that you need to keep running over and over again. You may have a chunk of code you want to run against each machine or something like that, and you create a for each loop, and then you pull a function every time that you hit the loop to do certain code to it. So yeah, functions are something. So show host name. How do we show the host name? We could use a function to get the host name, or we might simply want to look at a variable in RAM, and that is done by env. Look in the Windows environment, look in the memory of the computer and look for computer name. So that's pretty cool. Let's make this into a function though. Function. And I'm going to name this one get host name. I'm going to pause. after that. Okay, so let's test this out. Let's show the menu. Let me see if this here. Let's see where I've got this broken at. So I'm showing the menu. If I press number 1, I don't have the code in there to do anything yet. These are supposed to be semicolons. Hold on. It didn't pass the answer correctly. Is that going to return? Choose an option. Press number 1. So let's look at all the code that we've got so far. So we cleared the host. We created a function for showing the menu. It asks us to press an option. We chose that option. And what happened, the show menu command executed on line 23. So it jumped up here. It ran all of this code, asked us a question, and then when we pressed number 1, it fed that into answer down here. I didn't need to do it. I had the answer in the wrong spot. So it fed our input into answer. Then on line 24, it feeds it into switch. And the number 1 I pressed evaluates to number 1 right here, which runs the get host name. So that's the function up here. It's on line 19. And what does it do? it looks in the RAM of the computer, pulls out the computer name, and then it pauses. And that's what it's doing right now. We're right here at this pause. So as I press enter to continue, there wasn't anything else to run here, so it jumped out. So let's go ahead and do the others. Let's go ahead and create functions for last login, gateway, and uptime. And then we'll add those in here. And then we'll look at how to get it to, once that you select an option, that it will loop back up and show the menu again. I want you to Google how you can use PowerShell to show the last login. And I'm going to look at pulling out the username. So this right here, I had a little gap in the recording, but we're looking at how to do number 2, show the last login, Googling PowerShell and get last login. Got us to the site. They gave us an example of a get Active Directory user command here. We're selecting the name and the big long code out there for pulling the last login information. But what we have to figure out is the filter. We're filtering by name. And we want to see if we can figure out the username. So if I execute just environment username, and I see that I get administrator, that's who I'm logged in as. So that's giving me the right information. And since that's coming from RAM, if I log out and log in as a different user and run the same script, that'll pull the current username out of RAM that I'm in. So that's what I want to use. I'm going to go ahead and, what in the heck just happened? What did I do? Wanted to cut that. Okay, so I want that information to be replaced there. And I'm going to go ahead and run this line just to see before I put it into a function or anything. It did not output anything. And I should have had an output. I'm going to remove the quotes. And rerun. Oops. So we're having difficulties with the environment variable being ran. So when I have trouble could be the colon, or I got env and then I've got a colon there with PowerShell. That should pull out and work just fine, but I'm going to do a test, try to get this thing working. Sometimes if a certain way, especially if it's a weird type variable, that's not running. Is anybody getting anything? If I just hard code administrator in, does that work? So that works. So PowerShell is having an issue with the curly brackets right here. It's basically the stuff inside the curly brackets is separate. It's like escaping out, and it's trying to look at only the server. We're using get active directory user here. So I believe what the issue is, instead of looking at the local host RAM, the stuff inside a filter is filtering out stuff on the remote server. So the environment colon username is not something that's on the remote computer, and it doesn't know what to do with that because it's trying to talk to the Active Directory service And the Active Directory service that's running doesn't have an environment variable for username. So because it's in these curly brackets here, it's like, I don't know I'm in a box. I can't see whose house I'm in. I can't see the what address that I'm in. I was put in this box and shipped to Abu Dhabi or whatever. I'm trying to think, anybody ever watch, oh, Who's the Big Fat Orange Cat? It's wasn't Heathcliff, it was the orange cat that always ate lasagna.
Garfield.
Garfield, yeah, Garfield. And the little purplish cat that he's always going to mail off to. Is it Abu Dhabi? Somewhere? I don't know, whatever. But yeah, it's already been mailed off and doesn't know where to go. So there's a couple of possibilities that I'm going to try. And this thing to get it to run. I'll play with these curly brackets and dollar signs here to see. Need to get it to where it thinks that so I'm going to have to Google. So we've ran into a little bit of an issue. There's several ways to try to get this into there. There's actually a parameter function. So I'm going to Google get 80 user filter pass parameter. So I get an error when passing a variable to get 80 user. And we've got a Spiceworks here. That's pretty cool. There's also Stack Overflow. Spiceworks and Stack Overflow are two great websites. You see if you ever find one of those as a link. Those are great ones to try to jump to. Yes, I look familiar, ask questions all the time. So somebody's trying to pass, this is move 80 object. Don't really think this one's going to show me a good answer.
Hey, Mr. Goodman.
Yes.
I sent you a little line if you want to try that out in chat.
So you eliminated the filter, basically. So that kind of works. Let me see if that's for each. That's looking for, let me see if you're right. So why would I be? I should just be able to do identity or really nothing at all. But just eliminate all of that. Get active directory user with the username. So that does run. It's supposed to get all of the properties. And let's look for last login date. When created, SID history. So there is simply a last logon date. So that solves our problem. I don't know where they got this from. Maybe something that shows up if we filter out. I'll shrink it up and put last logon date by itself. So this is Robert's, fairly close to his example. That command right there looks like what we need to do. Displaying the name would be optional, but it might be good to display your name so it would be visual on the screen, like who did I log in as? But what we were having before is passing a parameter into curly brackets. And there is a way to come up with parameters and try to get them to work, but we didn't need to go that complex. We just needed to make things more simple and cut stuff out and not worry with the curly brackets anymore. Let's go ahead and run, create this as a function, because that's one line, but still we can make it even shorter by putting it in as a function. I'm going to name it get last logon because there's not a commandlet for get last logon. We just created one. Okay, let's run this again. Let's see what we've got going on. So if I execute this selection, I get asked the question. I hit number 2, I hit enter. It doesn't print to the screen. Well, nope. So if I hit enter, wait, where did I put a pause at? I press enter to continue, then it shows, then it quits. That's not the order I've got it typed. Why did it pause first? I have to figure out why it's pausing first and not. That's weird. Really weird. Let's take a break. When we come back from break, let's get it to where that it keeps asking us for another question instead of quitting out. And then we'll fill out the last 2. And then we'll try to figure out why that it's pausing after or before it's printing to the screen. Well, let's take a 10-minute break, and then we'll come back and turn this thing into a loop and then fix the last 2 options. So before I go ahead and finish this out, I want to go ahead and start making this thing loop and then go ahead and finish out 3 and 4 and then fix up anything. Because right now, once we hit something, we just quit out. So there's a couple of loops that we studied last week that would solve this particular situation. What loops did we study last week? While and do while, right? Which of the 2 loops do you think would work in this situation? We want a while loop or a do while loop. 50-50 guess. No. So we want to run a do while loop. It shouldn't have been a guess. You should have just like, well, we want to run the menu first before we checked what we inputted. So that's why we want to do a do while, because we want to go ahead and list the menu to the screen before we do any checks to figure out what did the user input. We don't want to check first. What did the user input if the user hasn't inputted anything? So that's where we can do a do while loop. So if I put do, what do I want to do? I want to show the menu and record the input and then check it against the switch statement and do any of the code. And then here's where I can make some changes. There's actually two different answers, but I'm going to do, and what do I want to loop? I want to loop showing the menu, checking the input, running one of those functions, and I want to continue doing that until what?
Got wrong last time. I'm not gonna answer again.
It's on the screen. I want to continue doing until what? What does the user have to do? Hit 5, right? There's two ways that we could look at this, and there's actually two different do statements. Somebody local, hold on. Yeah, they can leave a message. It's from here in BB. That's weird. Okay, so do, we can either do while. The answer is not equal to 5. That will work. There's another do. I typically just always use the do while, but there is another one that's really, really similar. It's do until. If I was to do that one, I would have to do it until it was equal to 5. So the way that while or until work is almost the same, but it does something until a condition is true. And then the do while does something until it's basically has to be in the inverse. So how do you want to write that? Do you want to do it until it equals 5? Or do you want to do it while it's not equal to 5? So two different ways to think about that. I like just using the while statement all the time and not playing with something different, because all I have to do with the while statement is do this while something's not equal to 5. That's the same thing as do until it's equal to 5. And just based on, are you looking for a true or false condition? So it's up to you. You can do until it's equal to 5, or you can do while it's not equal to 5. Either way is going to work. So let me test this out. Let me go and do a. I have to highlight it. and then run it. Okay, so I ran the do means show me the menu. Cool. As long as I don't hit 5, I don't even need this get menu down here. That's what the do's for. So I'm not going to hit that yet, but I'm going to do number, whoops, down here. If I do number 1, server 1, cool. Press enter to continue. It do's again. You like that one? It do's again. So because the while statement did not see a number 5, it re-executed line 30, showed the menu again, and now it's ready to go back and do the switch statement and stuff. So if I hit number 2 and press enter, and for some reason press enter again, we're going to have to fix that. The logic's weird in that one. And then if I hit 5, kind of had a mistake. I told it to show the menu again, but yeah, 5 quits. Yeah, okay, there it is, 5, yeah. 5 actually does return. I think it returns the value 5. It just returns what the user hit, returns what's in $sign answer, or returns the $sign answer. It's a keyword. While finally says 5, is 5 not equal to 5? That's not true, so it stops. 5 is equal to 5, so it stops looping. So there's a do while statement. That's why I went over do while last week, because we had used it in this class. So I think I'm going to come back to this one and try to figure out why the pause. What if I put 2 pauses in there? I guess I'm going to try now. Not understanding. I don't think I've ever seen that happen before, but I also don't think I've ever ran and made up that. So number 2, pause, hit enter. It doesn't make sense. Did you break something? Yours works?
Well, not exactly.
You saw something cool? Yes. I'm having to do a control A and right click and tell it to run. My control F5 is not working. There's a bug in this version of Visual Studio Code. That shows it. doesn't work. Come back to that and make it look a little pretty, but basically I have to do that right now to get an output before the pause. Okay. Has anybody got one that's not working right now? Yep. Yours is what?
Mine is not working. Whenever I press 5, it just brings the new method, and whenever I did 1 and 2, it wasn't popping up my functions.
Okay, hit number 1, see what happens. Okay, just do Control C. So let's troubleshoot on yours. So that's the debugger window. So we got your functions created. That looks good. But all your functions are in there. Show menus in there. So what we had to do here, we had to take that out. And we had to, basically we did it there. So you're doing that twice. That may be what the issue was. Is that you were storing the value inside the function, and then when you call the function, it wasn't passing that value out. Whereas if we get right here, it's passing that value out. So I think that's the whole issue. Does your Control F5 actually work, or do you have to select everything? I guess it's working. Now it's running. Hit number 1. Hit number 5.
It's trying to run it, but it's not going through.
That's so show menu. Answer answer switch, curly brackets, get host name. Wait, does it ever? Maybe it never stopped down there. Maybe that's what it was. Run selection, server 1, 2, -1. Okay, that's interesting. 5. Then it shows the last logon date. So I took the get menu out. Didn't need to do that. And I think those are semicolon. I think. I don't know if I've tested that or not. Let's look at your. So how to do the $A equals right there to get it to somewhat work. So there's a fix. Now, if I run the selection, do number 1, we got the server name. I do number 2, we got the last login name. It's a little bit funky on the output. If I do number T, I get an IDT 10 error. Seen you look up real quick. The number T, what are you talking about? And it reloads. Number 5. Okay, yours is looking better now. So on the get last login, I had to make sure that I recorded the output of the command into a variable and then go to display it onto the screen. And then you had the other option out of you didn't remove the variable in the show menu function. So I had to do that to get mine working. The read host is actually stored at this point. So when the show menu is executed and the read host is ran, that value is thrown into answer at that point instead of up here at the read host. So it's auto returning the value read in from the keyboard. And that return value is stored into the variable, then past the switch statements. So yes, when you test it out now and you run the selection, if you put an invalid number in, you should get the IDT 10 error telling you to press enter to continue. When you press enter to continue, it should bring the menu back onto the screen, allowing you to make a valid choice of, say, number 1, or a choice of, say, 5, and quitting out of the system. So you see maybe how the switch statement's starting to work here. We're checking for any values 1 through 5, and if we type anything else, it doesn't matter if it's a letter or a number, we hit default, we throw an error, we pause so the user can see this error. And then once they hit enter, that was not equal to 5. So it redisplays the menu and gives them a chance to choose one of the options again. So your choice now is, how do you find their gateway address?
Now it's. It was working. I took out the Get menu because I saw that apparently we didn't need that anymore. It stopped working. I put in Get menu again. It half worked. Now it's back out again.
I don't see why it won't work right now. Your curly brackets look like they're in place. What is it not doing?
Right now, whenever I try to do 2, it won't bring up anything, I do believe. And when I do 5, it brings up what 2 should do.
Change it to return instead of break.
Okay.
We want it to return the value of 5. That's what's happening. It's not returning anything. It's breaking and not.
I had some magic code where everything was working in there, and then unfortunately, there.
Yeah, it's okay for now. Hit enter and try number 5. You may not have. So 5 quit. So that's good. Go up to your other code, your number 2. Let's look and see what's up there. So we got the get. We're getting the last login. Okay, you need a $A equals in front of that line 23. Equals get -AD user.
Oh, just so.
There you go. Now it'll work.
Yep. I also kind of control Y myself living there, trying to fix that.
Yep. So show gateway address. Let's sometimes you just do netstat-r. So netstat-r shows us a bunch of junk. Shows us the routing table. That's a lot of info. I guess I actually don't have a default route. I guess I really can't do that on this one. There's some PowerShell. Spell it correctly. So there's some PowerShell commandlets. That shows me some routing information. I just Googled a bunch of different ways to get the default route. It didn't show the netstat-r. I just knew that one for historical oldness purposes anyway. So there's get IP configuration. that looks like probably out of all the ones examples that I see, get Netip configuration and select the IP default gateway, IP version 4 default gateway would be the best route to do. In our case, we have no default gateway, we have no internet in our lab, so it's blank. But that command would be what we would, I believe, is the best out of all of the ways to look at default gateways and stuff. That's the one that most of us would want to see, is the one reported by ipconfig. And to get netip configuration is a very similar command to get ipconfig that you're used to in your Cisco class. So if I created a function to get function get gateway, get netip configuration, and pipe that to a select statement. And put that for option 3. It's still doing the weirdness. $B equals that, and then write host. I'm going to do something a little bit different. Let me test out. I return, I do my pause here. Is that what I'm wanting to do? Hit Q for quit. Ah. Gateway's blank. Enter. 5 to quit. The outputs aren't quite that pretty yet. Show uptime. There you get the computer's uptime. PowerShell 6 has a get uptime commandlet. However, the built-in PowerShell is version 5.1. And you'd have to separately install a PowerShell 6 and alternatively execute PowerShell 6. So built into the OSs, there's got to be a different way. Show uptime. So I want to see how many days the computer has been running. So what I could do, I could get the current date with a get date command, and I can subtract the last time the computer booted. So I'd figure out a command that would show me the last time the computer booted. The Google search shows me there's a GCIM command that we can use. So I'm going to create a function. I'm actually going to name it Getuptime. That is included in PowerShell 6, but we don't have it in our version. So we'll create it ourselves. We're basically going to, we have $C equals, so we're going to get the current date. We're going to subtract the current date from the last time the computer booted. So there's GCIM command. that lets us look at certain operating system logs. Win32 operating system. Looking at the last boot up time of the Windows 32 operating system. So this variable information is part of Windows, and it's just reading through Windows documentation to be able to know what you want to pull out, look at other people's examples. And then I want to go ahead and, if I just run this by itself without anything, I want to see that I get something to my screen. That's, what does this return? Does it give us information? So it gives us a bunch of information. It gives us total days, total hours. It also gives us days, hours, minutes, seconds, milliseconds. You know, I'm not really concerned about milliseconds or maybe even seconds. Probably concerned about days, hours, and maybe minutes. So why don't I pipe this into select? And why don't I just look for the days column, the hours column, and the minutes column. Because it gave me a bunch of other columns down there, ticks, total days, total, it gave me all that stuff. But, so if I run that, and it just happened that I was already at 23 hours and 59 minutes and 27 seconds. So when I run it again, it actually ticked up to, it's exactly been 3 days. That's that made it look weird for a second. I was like, well, wait a second, why is 3? Did it round on me? No, it just happened to have ticked over to 3 exactly. So that right there, command, looks like that'll give us the correct information. That might be curious. Unix, Linux people, there's just an uptime command, and it shows you the last, how long it's been up. Real quick and easy. Windows is a little more complicated than that. Except for a little newer PowerShell, there is just get uptime. So I'll go ahead and do a write host, and we'll print that out to the screen. And then we'll pause. Then we'll get uptime. And it's lunchtime. We're having so much fun. I didn't realize what time it was. On Wednesday, we'll look at perfecting the output. The output is still looking kind of weird, just putting @ symbols and stuff. So we'll play at the right host and do some changes so that it stops putting in @ symbols and making the output look funky. But one cool thing, once it's all built out, you can have this as a copy, and all you have to do is make it do something else, is change what's in the curly brackets. Maybe give a new name or something. Okay, well, let's go eat some lunch. All that was in here. 4. This from there. You're as talented as I am. I didn't think anybody would be that talented.
Holding my skill of many years.
I'm definitely that bad.